Rain came softly that morning, tapping at the bookstore window like an old friend too polite to knock. Nora was already inside, of course, hunched over the counter with a mug of tea steeping beside the register. The shop always smelled of bergamot and old paper, a scent that seemed to soak into the wood shelves over the years. She flipped the closed sign to open. Though no one ever arrived before 9, and even then, only the true regulars. Mr. Ellis, the retired school teacher with his daily crossword and cinnamon scone. Marcy, the part-time florist who always smelled like crushed stems and hand cream. A quiet, small-town rhythm, reliable, predictable. That's why the cat stood out. It was perched neatly on the welcome mat when Nora unlocked the door. Like it had been waiting. No collar, no bell. Just sleek gray fur, white paws, and golden eyes that seemed too knowing, too fixed on her, as though it had something to say. Nora hesitated. Hello? The cat didn't move, not away, not forward. It simply blinked slowly, then stepped inside the moment she opened the door further. Oh, well, all right then, she said, trying not to sound too surprised. I suppose it's raining. The cat shook itself lightly, then trotted straight to the nonfiction aisle and curled up beneath a display table of travel guides. Like it belonged, like it had done this before. Nora watched it for a moment, unsure if she should call someone, the vet, maybe, or animal control, but instead, she returned to the counter and opened her planner. A yellow sticky note was stuck inside, one she didn't remember writing. Kindness begins with letting someone in. She frowned. That wasn't her handwriting. It was loopier, more elegant. She looked at the door again. The cat was staring at her. That first day, the cat didn't leave. Customers came and went, commenting with amused curiosity about the new shop assistant. Nora offered a vague explanation. Stray, maybe lost, but no one seemed worried. In fact, most looked delighted. Nice vibe, Marcy said as she bought a pressed flower journal. Like something from a novel? By closing time, Nora had placed a saucer of water near the travel section. The cat drank, then returned to its spot. She considered calling someone again, but the thought felt wrong. The next morning, it was still there, so she bought cat food. And that's how it started. On the third day, Nora found another note. This time, tucked inside a copy of The Secret Garden by the Till. The note read, "Not all locked doors need keys. Same handwriting. Same faint scent of lavender." She looked up sharply, half expecting to find someone watching, but no one was there except the cat, sitting upright by the front display, tail curled around its paws. "I didn't put that there," she murmured. The cat blinked. By the end of the week, Nora had set up a small pillow bed beneath the front window. The cat, who she still hadn't named, had taken to greeting customers with an imperious nod before returning to its various nap spots. It seemed to know who liked pets and who preferred polite distance. Nora found herself talking to it more and more out loud, like a friend. "You're strange, you know that?" she said one evening while restocking the poetry shelf. "I think you're following a plan. A mysterious, secret cat mission." The cat patted over and placed a paw on the edge of the shelf, brushing a single book forward. "The Names We Carry," Nora stared. She hadn't seen that book in years. She opened it. Inside, tucked between pages, was another note. "You forgot your own name once. Start there." The room felt suddenly still. The soft hum of the rain returning to her awareness like static clearing from a radio. She looked at the cat. "What are you?" It meowed just once. The rain finally cleared by morning, leaving behind cuddles that shimmered with sunrise and sidewalks that smelled faintly of moss. Nora opened the bookstore early, unsure why she felt drawn to arrive before the town truly woke. Maybe it was the silence, maybe it was the cat. It was already there, of course, sitting exactly where she'd left it the night before, curled on the pillow bed, tail flicking lazily in its sleep. It hadn't tried to leave once. No scratching at the door, no pacing. just that unshakable calm, as if it had always lived there. She crouched beside it. "Did you put that note in the poetry book too?" she whispered. The cat cracked one golden eye open, as if to say, "You already know the answer." Later that morning, she told herself she wouldn't think about the notes anymore. Probably just a customer with an odd sense of whimsy. Someone playing a harmless game, maybe Mr. Ellis. But he was far too direct. Or Marcy. No, too chatty. Someone else. She had just tucked a new shipment of used books onto the donation cart when she found another one. Inside, an unlabeled novel about a girl and her garden, folded precisely into the center page. Your story didn't start with loss. Go back further. Nora froze, fingers still pressed to the paper. Her breath caught not in fear, but recognition. Whoever was doing this knew her, not the surface her, the beneath her. She ran her fingers over the note, then read it again. Go back further. She didn't cry often, even when she'd moved into this town after everything unraveled in the city. Even when her mother's house, her childhood home, was boxed, sold, and scrubbed of memory. But sitting alone at the back of the shop, warm mug in her hand, cat at her feet, Nora felt something loosen in her chest. She had gone missing from herself a little. "Hey," came a voice from the front of the shop, startling her. It was a teenager, maybe 17, half hidden under a too-big hoodie, nervously clutching a notebook. "Sorry, I heard you might have space for poetry open mic." Nora blinked, caught off guard. We haven't hosted one in a while, but yes, we do. Usually Fridays." The girl nodded quickly, looking down. "Cool, I was just wondering." Nora smiled. "You right?" The girl hesitated. "I try." "Well, we'd love to hear you try." Something softened in the girl's face. She tucked the notebook against her chest, nodded again, and turned to leave, but paused near the front table. The cat looked up at her. She crouched slowly and scratched under its chin. "I like your cat." Nora opened her mouth to correct her, but paused. "Me too." That night, Nora closed the shop later than usual. She didn't know why. It wasn't busier than normal, and the sky had already gone violet with dusk. But something in the air told her not to rush. As she wiped down the counter, she noticed the children's section light still on. She walked over and found another note, resting on a copy of Harold in the purple crayon. "You are more than what was left behind." This time she sat down right there on the rug, the cat curling beside her. No name for it yet. It didn't seem to want one. Or maybe it already had one and she just hadn't been told. Later, when she was closing the front door, she paused to look back at the shelves, the worn floorboards, the cat now perched in the window like a watchful little statue. This was her place now, not just to hide in, not just to run away to, but maybe to return to something. She reached for the light switch, then stopped. Another sticky note, this one taped inside the door frame. It read, "You'll know when to ask." She exhaled a shaky laugh, heart thudding not with fear, but something like anticipation. "All right," she said softly into the quiet. "I'm listening." The cat blinked once, then looked away. Friday came with that special kind of brightness, a clear, honey-colored morning that made even the sidewalk cracks feel forgiving. Nora opened the bookstore early again, out of habit now, but also for the ritual of it. Tea, cat, silence. Her new trinity, the cat still nameless, was already at the window as she arrived, tail tucked around its paws. Watching the world like a librarian at the edge of a page, Nora bent to scratch behind its ears. "We're having guests tonight," she said softly. "Don't startle the poets." The cat sneezed delicately and blinked at her. By 7, chairs had been arranged in a half moon around the fiction section. A table held spiced cider, ginger cookies, and a box labeled "Open Mic Sign Up." Fairy lights wound their way up the support beams. It wasn't a crowd, maybe 10 people, but each one brought something warm into the room. Nervous smiles, handmade notebooks, a spark behind the eyes. And there she was again, the hoodie girl from earlier in the week. She sat in the second row, notebook clutched tightly, head down. Nora made her way over. "I'm glad you came." The girl nodded. I wrote something. Would you like to read?" She bit her lip. "Maybe third or fourth?" Nora smiled. "Perfect. I'll call you up." The cat, naturally, had claimed the front row cushion of a wingback chair, looking for all the world like a literary judge. The reading began. First was Mr. Darley, a soft-spoken retired professor whose words wandered through memory like mist across old photos. Then Marcy, reading a poem about wind chimes and missing her mother's laugh. A few claps, a few long silences. Then Nora nodded toward the girl. She rose slowly, stiff-backed but determined. I don't have a title," she said into the mic. And then she began. Her voice wavered at first, then grew. A poem about walking through silence, about wanting to yell in a world that whispers, about a sky that felt too wide for someone who always looked down. When she finished, the room held its breath for a moment. Then applause, gentle but sure. Nora clapped too, smiling as the girl returned to her seat, cheeks red but eyes shining. The cat purred audibly. After the reading, Nora stayed late, washing mugs and reshelving books left behind. The girl lingered, helping without asking. "My name's Wren," she said finally, "like the bird." Nora looked up from a tray of cups. "That's beautiful," Wren shrugged. "I hated it for a while, but it suits me now, I guess." They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Wren glanced over. "Can I ask you something weird?" Nora smiled. "Go for it. That cat." She nodded toward the window, where it now sat staring at its reflection in the dark. "It's not normal, is it?" Nora blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it looks at me like it knows what I'm afraid of. Not in a creepy way, just like it's watching and waiting for me to stop hiding." Nora set the last cup down carefully. "I think it knows what we forget about ourselves," she said slowly. "Or maybe what we need reminding of." Wren nodded. "Yeah, that." After Wren left, Nora found herself wandering the poetry section, drawn without reason. She paused beside a battered anthology. Tucked just barely between its pages was the now familiar cream paper. This one read, "You are not finished just because you feel small." She held it to her chest. There were times she'd felt tiny enough to disappear. Yet here she was, holding worn pages, hearing new voices, anchoring shy souls to each other in our little bookshop. The cat hopped onto the stool beside her and stretched. "You're doing something, aren't you?" she whispered to it. "You're bringing people here on purpose." It yawned widely and knocked a pen off the counter. "Helpful," she muttered, but with a laugh. Then she picked up the pen and scribbled something on the back of the note. "Are you waiting for me to ask something?" She left it beside the cat's bed, just in case. The next morning, Nora entered the bookstore already talking. "All right, if you move the pens again, I swear." But the cat wasn't in its usual window perch. It wasn't on the front cushion or beneath the travel table either. She blinked, set her tote bag down, and wandered the aisles with slow steps. "Okay, new hiding spot?" The cat was in the poetry nook, curled between two stacks like a well-placed comma. Tucked neatly beside it, half under a folded paw, was another note. Nora crouched, heart already thumping with a kind of quiet thrill. "You may ask. It's safe now." She sat right there on the floor, legs folded, back against a bookcase. She stared at the note, then at the cat. Its golden eyes watched her with the same serene gravity they always had. "What am I supposed to ask?" she said aloud. "You never say, you just hint," the cat blinked. Nora sighed and leaned her head back, eyes on the ceiling. It wasn't just the notes. It was the way the bookstore had started to feel alive in new ways, how customers lingered longer, how people opened up more, smiled more, how strangers wandered in off the street by accident and left with a book they needed for years. It was Wren's poem. It was the professor's memories. It was her own dreams returning. She looked at the cat again. "Okay," she said softly. "What's your name?" It tilted its head, then looked away toward the nonfiction section. "I don't mean a name I give you," she clarified. "I mean your name, the one you already have." The cat stood, stretched, and padded away. She followed. It led her down an aisle she rarely touched. Philosophy, spiritual essays, and some metaphysical odds and ends that had come from dusty estate sales. A shelf mostly passed over by her usual readers. The cat stopped beside a thick book with faded blue binding, of familiar things and unfamiliar truths. Nora pulled it free. Dust scattered from the top edge. It opened to a page marked by a square of soft gray ribbon. The margin was underlined faintly in pencil. Names are not always spoken. Sometimes they are remembered. She closed the book slowly. Her fingers trembled just slightly. Her voice was quieter than usual when she asked, "Did I know you before?" The cat pressed its forehead against her shin, then walked away. That night, she stayed in the shop long after closing. There was a comfort to the hush of it. She brewed a second cup of tea and sat in the wingback chair by the window, legs tucked beneath her, journal open on her lap. It had been years since she wrote anything just for herself. She'd forgotten what her own voice sounded like in ink. The cat lay nearby, paws folded, tail flicking every so often. It didn't sleep. "Did you know me as a child?" she asked it, back when the world still felt full of stories. No answer, but the silence after the question felt warm, not hollow. In the morning, Nora opened a box of new donations. Inside were mostly paperbacks, romances, cookbooks, a gardening journal with pressed pansies between the pages. And at the bottom, a book she hadn't seen since she was 10. The Girl and the Wind Horse, her favorite, dog-eared and soft from rereading. It couldn't be the same copy. And yet, as she opened the front flap, there it was, her name in big, blocky handwriting. Nora B, and under it, in a more elegant hand she didn't recognize. "You're still in there." Her breath caught. The cat padded up beside her and sat, tail curled neatly around its feet. Nora looked at it. "Your name is Ash," she said. The cat blinked once, slowly. She hadn't thought about that name in years. It had come to her when she was 8, scribbled in her notebook next to a drawing of a gray cat with white paws and golden eyes. A fictional friend, one she talked to when no one else listened. "You're not real," she whispered, not quite sure if she was asking or stating. Ash meowed softly, not in protest. More like, "Who says that matters?" That night, Nora didn't find a note. Instead, she found her old notebook placed neatly beside her bed, right where she used to keep it growing up. Same corner-folded pages. Same ink blot on the last line. She hadn't seen it in years. And inside, on the first blank page, something new. "You finally asked?" The notebook sat on Nora's kitchen table all morning. She didn't touch it at first. She just looked at it between bites of toast, feeling the weight of it. Not just its pages, but everything it had survived. The move, the boxes, the years of disuse. How had it found its way back to her? Ash, as she had now named him, though he'd likely always been named, lay on the windowsill, eyes closed, tail twitching every so often as if editing a dream. Nora finally picked up the notebook and flipped through it slowly. There were sketches of cats, of course, and trees. A page where she had written her name a dozen times in a row, experimenting with flourishes. Then a series of small stories, some only a paragraph long. A girl who could turn invisible only when sad. A boy who lived in a clock. A cat who guarded forgotten things. She paused there. The page was dated. She had been 9. The cat's name was Ash. She had written it in curly pencil script, underlined twice. There was a line beneath that in a second, smaller handwriting. "When you forget, I will find you." She didn't remember writing that part. That afternoon, she opened the shop a little late. The morning had pulled her inward, and she hadn't felt like hurrying back out. The bell above the door jingled, and Wren stepped inside. She looked more confident than the week before her hoodie was gone, replaced by a soft flannel shirt and a necklace with a tiny charm shaped like a birdcage. "I wrote something new," Wren said shyly. "Can I read it to you?" "Of course," Nora said, gesturing toward the reading chair. Wren sat and opened her notebook. "It's about doors." After the reading, they lingered at the counter. "That cat still weirds me out a little," Wren admitted, sipping hot cider. "It watches like it knows what I dream about." "Maybe it does," Nora said, smiling gently. Wren raised an eyebrow. "You don't think that's creepy?" "No, I think it's comforting." Wren hesitated. "Hey, random question. Do you keep anything in that drawer under the old register?" Nora blinked. "That thing hasn't opened in years." "Well," Wren said, "it's open now." They walked together to the counter. Sure enough, the drawer beneath the vintage till had popped open half an inch. Nora knelt and pulled it the rest of the way. Inside was a ribbon-tied bundle of letters. She lifted them out, hands trembling. They were addressed to her, but none of them were in her handwriting. She untied the ribbon and read the first one aloud. "Dear Nora, you forgot how brave you were when you built the Pillow Fort Kingdom, how you declared yourself Queen of Never Crying. You kept that title for 3 whole days. I'm proud of you." Me, her voice cracked. Wren sat quietly on the floor beside her, legs crossed, eyes wide. "You okay?" she asked softly. Nora nodded. "These are from me, but not this me. A past me, or maybe a part of me I left behind." She flipped to the next one. "Dear Nora, it's okay to miss people who forgot how to stay. It doesn't mean you weren't worth staying for. You are. Always have been." Me, she stopped reading. Just sat there, holding the paper like it might vanish. Ash jumped onto the counter and pawed at one of the loose letters, not to destroy it, just to feel the corner. Wren tilted her head. "You really think the cat brought these?" Nora didn't answer, not directly, but she looked at Ash and said, "Thank you." The cat blinked. That evening, Nora closed the drawer, gently returned the letters, and locked the register for the first time in years. She stood behind the counter a moment longer, hand on the worn wood, feeling something like forgiveness hum beneath her palm. Later, as she turned out the lights, she saw another note, this one taped to the back door. "You can remember without breaking." She didn't cry. Not this time. The weekend brought a warmth that clung to everything. Even the bricks outside the shop glowed. The town felt suspended in a season that didn't quite belong to summer or fall, but held the best of both crisp air, soft light, the smell of cinnamon from somewhere always just out of reach. Nora arrived to find a scarf on the bookshop's front step. No tag, no note. Pale blue with little stitched leaves at the ends. She lifted it carefully. It was warm and not damp from the morning dew. Ash sat inside the window, watching her. "You left this?" she asked aloud. The cat simply blinked and stretched. She draped it over a chair near the register and added a sticky note. "Lost and found." But somehow she knew it wouldn't be claimed. Not by anyone except her. That morning brought a slow trickle of customers, mostly regulars, a few new faces. Wren dropped by again with another poem, this one half finished. She stayed for tea and curled into the corner reading chair like it was part of her own living room. Nora was reshelving a small stack when she spotted the boy. He was maybe 10, thin, with a buttoned-up coat 2 sizes too big and untied boots. His hands were in his pockets, but he studied the books with quiet intensity, like someone searching for something important. Nora didn't speak right away. She let him browse. When he picked up a worn copy of The Secret Garden, she stepped over. "But it's a favorite," she said gently. You can sit with it if you want. He nodded and sat cross-legged by the window. Ash joined him after a moment, just settled there beside the boy like they'd done it 100 times. The boy read in silence for an hour. Then he stood, placed the book back, and looked at Nora. You keep lost things here. She tilted her head. Books mostly. Not just books, he said. Other things too. She didn't ask how he knew. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a tiny silver bell. This fell off my sister's bracelet, he said. She cried for days. I thought, maybe if I gave it to the right place, it would get back to her. Nora held out her hand. He dropped the bell into her palm. Thank you, she said. We'll keep it safe. He nodded, then left without another word. Ash followed him to the door, then returned to the window and lay down, tail flicking. Later, Nora placed the bell beside the blue scarf on the lost and found chair. The light caught it and made it shimmer faintly. Something about the way they looked together made her heart twist. That night, she found another note, this time tucked into the spine of an old journal on her nightstand. You are a keeper of echoes? She read it 3 times. The phrase settled into her ribs like a truth she'd always known but never said aloud. Keeper of echoes. She liked that. On Sunday, a woman walked into the shop with a hesitant smile and windblown hair. She wore a cardigan stitched with stars and clutched a small box. I don't really know why I'm here, she said. I was on my way to the hardware store and turned. Nora had heard that before. I think this is where it belongs, the woman said, placing the box on the counter. Inside was a small collection of objects, a ceramic thimble, a ribbon, a feather sealed in glass. They're from my grandmother, the woman said. She used to say magic hides in the quietest things. Nora nodded, voice soft. It does. They shared a long pause. The woman exhaled, smiled again, more fully now, and left with a book on celestial gardening. Nora placed the box beside the bell. Ash watched quietly from the stair landing. That evening, the wind picked up outside. The town smelled like baked apples and chimney smoke. Nora stayed late, legs low, a candle flickering near the counter. She looked at the scarf, the bell, the feather box. I think we're collecting people's forgotten pieces, she murmured. Ash blinked slowly. A page flipped on its own behind her. She didn't turn. She just smiled and whispered, I'll keep them all, everyone. And the candle flickered once in approval. The back room of the bookshop had never quite decided what it wanted to be. When Nora moved in, it was just a dusty spill of boxes and forgotten furniture, odd lamps. A coat rack missing half its hooks, and a table with mismatched legs. She used it mostly for storage, but lately the room had been changing. It wasn't the layout, that stayed the same. But it had a new kind of warmth. The light lingered longer, dust didn't settle quite as fast. And when she walked in, she always had the faintest feeling she'd interrupted something just out of sight. Ash had taken to napping there. Not his usual half-lidded window naps, but deep, purring sleep like the kind cats only do when they trust the walls around them. So on Monday morning, Nora moved a few things around. She brought in a second armchair from the front, one with soft yellow upholstery and a button missing from the armrest. She laid down an old quilt with faded roses and swept the corners clean. It was subtle, the transformation. But somehow it felt more like a room now. That same day, a boy she didn't know came in with a grandfather in tow. The man looked like he hadn't meant to stop. He was confused, maybe. His coat was too light for the weather, and his shoes didn't quite match. The boy guided him gently with a hand on his elbow. We're just looking, the boy told her kindly. He used to come here, I think. Nora's heart pulled tight. She gave them space, watching quietly. The man wandered toward the back room, and when he crossed the threshold, he stopped. Just stopped. His shoulders settled, his hands unclenched. This is the room, he said, barely above a whisper. Nora joined them, keeping her voice soft. Did you used to read here? He nodded. We sat right there. My wife read to me. About a girl and a fox in the snow. Nora looked to the shelf near the back. She pulled down A Fox Beneath the Frost, a slim novel almost no one ever asked for. The man took it in his hands like he'd just been handed back a piece of himself. I thought this was gone, he murmured. The boy helped him sip. They stayed in the room for almost an hour, the man reading slowly aloud, with the boy listening like he was hearing magic itself. When they left, the man hugged the book to his chest. Nora didn't charge them for it. That night, she sat in the back room by candlelight, ash sprawled across her lap. On the table were the lost things, the bell, the scarf, the feather box, and a new edition, a pair of reading glasses someone had left behind that very afternoon. She'd set them down absent-mindedly, only to realize a moment later that they belonged to the professor from the first week. He hadn't returned for them. But somehow, she didn't think they were forgotten. She opened her notebook and wrote, "This room remembers for us, not with photographs." With feeling, she closed the book. Ash purred louder. The next morning, she made a hand-lettered sign and hung it just above the back room door. The room of found things, it wasn't official. It wasn't registered with any city office or organized on the inventory sheet. But people began to find their way to it. A woman left a pressed flower between the pages of a cookbook and whispered, "This belonged to my mother." A teenager brought in a single ceramic button from their old jacket and left it on the table, just in case someone needs it. An elderly man came every Thursday at noon, sat silently for 20 minutes, and left without ever buying a thing. None of them seemed surprised when ash curled around their ankles or purred beside them. None of them asked for receipts. Nora didn't question it. She simply brewed an extra pot of tea and let the room become what it needed to be. That evening, a storm rolled in. Rain splashed heavy against the windows. The lights flickered, but inside, the room of found things glowed with a softness Nora couldn't explain. The lamp didn't flicker. The candle didn't sputter. It felt like the room held its own weather now, quiet, steady, and warm. Ash lay on the chair beside her, tail tucked neatly over his paws. And in the center of the table, beneath the blue scarf, was another note, not folded this time, just resting there like it had always been. Some rooms are built from memory, not wood. Nora touched the edge of the paper. Then this one, she whispered, must be made from mine. Ash purred. And somewhere beneath the hum of rain, the room smiled. On Wednesday, someone left a lantern. It wasn't new. The metal frame bore tiny rust freckles, and the glass had a small crack in one panel, shaped like a crescent moon. But it was clean, well cared for, and when Nora lifted the lid, a faint scent of lavender lingered inside. No visitor claimed it. She placed it gently on the windowsill of the room of found things, beside a copy of a weathered poetry book. At dusk, it caught the amber light in such a way that made the crack glow gold. Ash watched her set it down, then trotted over and tapped the base once with a paw, as if giving it his approval. That afternoon, Wren arrived soaked to the knees. Her hair was tucked into a wool cap, her cheeks red from wind. "Do you know your sign blew off?" she said, dripping onto the mat. Nora blinked. "The sandwich board?" "Yep, it's halfway down Oak Street." I grabbed it. She held up a slightly dented chalkboard sign that read, "Today's weather, books, cats, and cinnamon." "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Wren smiled. They dragged the board together, then spent the next hour sipping hot cider and rearranging the found things table in the back room. Wren gently turned the lantern. "My grandmother had one just like this," she murmured. "She used to tell stories by lamplight during storms." Nora paused, holding a folded note someone had left with a tiny origami bow. "She sounds like someone worth remembering." "She was," Wren said, "and I think part of her is still around when it rains." That night, the wind howled outside, but the bookshop stayed warm. Nora lit a real candle in the lantern, and its flickering glow filled the back room like a memory softly warming its corners. Ash lay in a perfect circle on the rug, tail to nose. Nora opened the drawer beneath the register and retrieved another one of the old letters, her own handwriting from long ago. Dear Nora, sometimes you feel like an echo of someone else, but echoes are just proof that something real made sound. You are not what's left behind. You are what continues. She held the letter to her chest and exhaled slowly. Somewhere, the lantern flame danced. On Friday, the room of found things became something more. It started with a knock, not on the front door, but the side. No one used that door, not customers, not delivery people. But now it stood open, just a crack. Through it came a woman holding a woven basket and a coat with wooden buttons. I'm not sure why I came, she said. I just walked. She looked at the table. Her eyes widened. That's my father's scarf, she whispered. Nora blinked. The blue one? She nodded, hands trembling. He lost it years ago. I made it for him. I thought I'd imagined it when I saw it through the window last week, but it's really here. Would you like to take it? No, she said. I think it belongs here now, but... May I sit with it? Nora led her to the armchair. The woman sat, unwrapped her basket, and produced a book of fables. May I read aloud? She asked. Of course. So Nora made tea, Ash curled in his usual spot. The woman read in a steady voice, slow, clear, like each word had weight. By the time she closed the book, the scarf had been moved, not by her, but now rested across the arm of her chair, like it had come to listen too. That night, Nora found a paper tucked beneath the lantern. Not a letter this time, a drawing. A sketch of the room perfectly detailed. The chair, the books, Ash curled on the rug. In the drawing, Nora stood by the table. Her hand was on her heart, and written below in tiny handwriting, "You are the light that stories come home to." She stared at it for a long time. She did not know who had drawn it, but she knew it was true. Nora kept the bookshop open a little later that Saturday. The light outside had gone amber, then violet, then a velvet blue that dusted the rooftops with softness. She didn't bother turning on the overhead lights, just left the lamps glowing, the candle in the lantern flickering gently, and soft piano music playing on the radio. It was the kind of evening that made people walk slower, notice more, and apparently wander inside. The first visitor was a man in a green overcoat with gloves tucked into his pocket and a wide-brimmed hat that looked older than he was. I'm not lost, he said immediately, but I do think I was supposed to find this place. He wasn't looking at Nora, though. He was looking at the room of found things. Without waiting for permission, he stepped in. Ash rose from the rug, circled the man's legs once, then settled back into place. The man gave a small, reverent nod and began walking the perimeter of the room like someone studying a museum exhibit. I used to have a box just like that, he said quietly, pointing to the feather and glass, and that scarf. The pattern's the same as one my sister wore every winter. Nora stayed near the doorway. I don't think they're the same objects, she offered gently. But they're the same feeling. The man turned. That's even better, isn't it? She nodded. He didn't stay long. Just enough to look at everything, touch nothing, and whisper something under his breath before tipping his hat and leaving into the dark. The second visitor came an hour later. A teenage girl, maybe 15, with a backpack, headphones, and sleeves too long for her arms. She walked straight to the room of found things, gave Ash a scratch behind the ears, and sat on the floor with her back against the bookshelf. She didn't speak for 10 minutes. Then she said, "This room feels like a place I forgot I wanted." Nora looked up from where she was restocking the poetry shelf. That's a lovely thing to say. The girl pulled out a notebook and began to draw. The scratch of pencil filled the silence. "I'm going to leave a page here," she said after a while. in case someone needs it. When she left, Nora found the page pinned gently beneath a stone on the side table. It was a sketch of Ash, the lantern, and a soft window glow. But in the margins were words written over and over like a spell. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay. She didn't remove it. She just placed a small plate beside it with a tiny paper sign. Comfort notes. Take one if you need. By morning, 3 had already been taken. Sunday morning brought quiet again. Fog wrapped the town in a soft hush. Footsteps outside sounded like whispers. Nora brewed her tea slowly, letting the steam fog the windows. She found herself writing without thinking. I don't think I'm building a collection. I think I'm building a conversation between what was loved and what still is. She tucked the note into a leather-bound journal left behind weeks ago. Its original owner had never come back. But maybe someone else would pick it up. Maybe they'd find the note and know what it meant. By mid-afternoon, a couple in their 60s wandered in, holding hands. They didn't speak much, just browsed. Then the man gently nudged the woman toward the back. Her eyes widened when she saw the room of found things. This is, she said, trailing off. Nora gave her space. They stayed for 20 minutes. Before they left, the woman took a photo of the lantern, not for social media, just for herself. She looked at Nora with a small, full smile. I lost my sister last year. This room feels like she might have left something here, even if I can't see it. You're always welcome, Nora said. That evening, she found another note tucked into the typewriter's case, a new hand. Different ink. Some places don't give you answers. They give you permission. She stared at it for a long while. Ash meowed once, softly. Nora folded the note, placed it into the journal beside the others, and whispered, Then I give permission too. Outside, the fog clung close. But inside, everything felt just right. The next morning, Nora found a candle in her mailbox. It was wrapped in brown paper and tied with a piece of yarn. No note. No return name. Just a small, hand-poured candle in a ceramic cup the color of salt. She held it to her nose, beeswax and something floral, faint but comforting. Ash bumped her ankle. You think it's for the shop? She asked aloud. Ash blinked once, which she'd come to interpret as something between yes and obviously. She placed it in the room of found things beside the lantern. By mid-morning, a soft floral scent mingled with the musty vanilla of old pages and distant cinnamon from the cafe next door. The candle burned low but steady. It was Monday again, the kind of gray day that made the world feel a little thinner around the edges. Rain tapped lightly at the windows. Nora spent the first part of the day restocking and sipping tea. A few customers drifted in, a pair of friends whispering over the mystery shelf, an older woman in galoshes asking for gardening memoirs, a man with paint-speckled hands who bought a book on constellations without saying a word. But the room of found things remained empty for most of the day. It wasn't until late afternoon, as the sky dimmed, that someone stepped through its threshold. A woman in her 30s, holding a journal and a travel mug, entered slowly. Nora looked up from her spot behind the counter. Back again? She asked gently. The woman nodded. I've been thinking about this room all week. I needed to come back before I forgot how it felt. She walked to the table and took a seat. Ash patted over and sat at her feet like a guard. The woman set down her journal and opened it, hesitating before writing. I don't usually let myself rest, she admitted, but here, I don't feel guilty. Nora didn't respond. She just brought her a warm cup of tea and set it beside her. No charge, no receipt. Just a quiet yes to her presence. That evening, after closing, Nora walked through the shop slowly. She did this every night now, not to clean, not to check inventory, but to listen, to feel what the space wanted to tell her. In the room of found things, she noticed the candle had burned halfway down. Beside it, someone had left a folded paper star. She picked it up, expecting a name or a message inside. Instead, she found a single sentence. "We are all carrying someone's light." She read it twice. Then she tucked it into her apron pocket. She thought of all the things this room had carried since it first began. The scarf, the glasses, the drawings, the stories shared aloud without fanfare. All the unnamed griefs and quiet joys that had passed through. It made her want to write something herself. So she fetched her own notebook, sat cross-legged beside Ash, and wrote, "This place isn't haunted, it's held. Held by memories, held by kindness, held by the quiet permission to feel." Ash pressed his nose to her knee in silent agreement. A few days later, a postcard arrived in the mail. No address on the front, just the words, "To the room of found things." The photo showed a small seaside cliff with a lighthouse in the background. On the back, in blocky handwriting, "I haven't spoken to anyone about her, but I sat in your chair and I remembered how she left. That's enough for now. Thank you." Nora placed the postcard in a tiny brass frame and set it on the windowsill, beside the paper star and the candle, now just a stub. That evening, the sky broke open into stars, no clouds, no rain. She turned off the overhead lights, lit the lantern and the candle, and opened the side door, just a little. Just enough to say, "You are welcome, whoever you are." Then she sat on the rug beside Ash and let the room glow around her. Not bright, not loud, but just enough. Just enough borrowed light to say, "You're not alone." On Tuesday morning, Nora found the drawer open, the one beneath the antique writing desk in the room of found things. The drawer that never slid easily, always sticking just before the halfway point. She didn't remember opening it. Inside, nestled in a bed of folded velvet, was a small hand mirror. Its silver frame was tarnished, the handle chipped. The glass had a fog to it, not cracked, not dirty, just ... Soft, like it only showed you what you were ready to see. She picked it up. Her own reflection stared back, muted and tender. Not quite smiling, but not lost either. Ash meowed behind her. "I don't remember placing this here," she said aloud. Ash leapt onto the desk and pawed gently at the velvet. A single cat hair drifted into the drawer and settled there, as if claiming the mirror into his archive. So Nora left it. Beside the mirror, she added a small card. "What we see can be kind too." By midday, the mirror had already drawn 3 visitors. The first, a boy around 10, came in with his grandmother. While she browsed the cookbooks, he wandered into the back and spotted the mirror. He stared into it quietly, then asked Nora, "Is this magic?" She crouched beside him. "Do you think it might be?" He nodded solemnly. "I look happier in it," she smiled. "Then maybe it is." The second visitor came alone. A woman in a long gray sweater and scuffed boots, carrying a tote full of return books. She didn't say much, but lingered near the mirror long enough to notice the frame, to straighten the velvet beneath it, to glance once over her shoulder, as though afraid someone might see her hoping. Before she left, she added something. A folded piece of paper tucked carefully into the drawer. Nora waited until closing before reading it. "I'm learning to like the person I am now. The old me isn't gone. She's just resting." And Nora placed it beside the journal where the others had left notes, in a section she now called Quiet Courage. Late that evening, the mirror caught the last of the golden sunlight. It spilled across the desk and shimmered briefly on Ash's fur. The cat stretched, yawned, and then curled around the base of the desk like a guardian. Nora stood in the doorway and watched them both. The mirror, the light, the quiet trust of a room that understood things without needing explanation. On Wednesday, someone left a feather. It was large, possibly from a hawk, and striped in beautiful bands of dark and gold, not dropped randomly, not blown in. It had been placed carefully atop the poetry collection, with a smooth pebble holding it in place. No, but Nora added a sign. Found, something that once knew flight. A teenager took a photo of it, then left behind a shell in return. No pattern to it all, and yet it all felt orchestrated somehow. Like a slow conversation unfolding in object and gesture. Like the room itself was listening. That afternoon, a regular customer named Theo stopped in. He was tall, quiet, with laugh lines around his eyes, and a habit of humming while he browsed. This time, he hovered in the room of found things. Finally, he asked, "Do people donate these?" Nora hesitated. Some yes, others just appear. He smiled thoughtfully. I think that's how memory works too. You don't always go looking for it. It finds you when it's ready. He left behind a compass. No explanation. Just placed it gently on the table, turned slightly to the east. Ash circled it once and sat, as if to say, "This matters now." Nora stood behind the counter that night, long after closing, journal in hand. She wrote, "Today I watched a child believe in his own happiness. Today someone looked in a mirror and didn't flinch. Today I was reminded that even objects carry breath. And maybe, just maybe, I am learning how to carry mine too." Ash rubbed against her ankle. The lantern flickered once. And the mirror, though still and quiet, shimmered faintly in the dusk. The next morning, Nora found names, not scribbled hastily, not printed or signed, but written deliberately, softly, and with care, on slips of torn paper tucked into corners of the room of found things. Some were folded into the spines of old books. Others slipped under the edge of the rug. One was pressed behind the mirror's velvet lining, first names only, or initials. Sometimes just a word that felt like a name, Mara, T, Sunflower, Little Ghost, Dad. They weren't labels. They were offerings. Ash sniffed each one before Nora gently collected them and placed them in a wooden box labeled, "For the Remembered." She didn't read them aloud. She didn't need to. The room knew. Around midday, a young man entered with damp hair and an overstuffed messenger bag. He looked tired, not just from lack of sleep, but from carrying something long, something heavy. He drifted to the back without speaking. Ash met him at the threshold. The young man knelt, scratched behind the cat's ears, and whispered something Nora couldn't hear. Then he sat on the floor and opened a small notebook, covered in tape and stickers. For half an hour, he didn't move, just stared at the mirror. Then he began to write. When he finally stood, he left behind a cassette tape, cracked, with no label, and tucked his note behind it. Later, after the store had emptied, Nora read the note. This was her favorite tape. We used to dance in the kitchen, her socks sliding on the tile. I couldn't bring myself to throw it out, but maybe it belongs somewhere softer now. Nora placed the tape on a small shelf near the lantern, under a sign she updated to say, "Things once loved deeply." Later that week, it snowed. Not much, just a dusting that turned the rooftops sugared and the sidewalks slushy. But enough that people slowed down, turned their collars up, and looked for warm spaces. The bookshop filled with quiet chatter and gloved hands clutching cocoa. Nora noticed something new. People were bringing others in. One woman led her friend by the hand, murmuring, "I told you, you have to feel it, not just see it." A boy tugged his dad toward the mirror. "Look, it's like magic, right?" The room of found things was no longer just a room. It was a ritual. That evening, Nora placed something of her own. It was a letter, not addressed to anyone specific, not signed. Just words she hadn't known where else to put. There are parts of me I thought had vanished, but this place reminds me they were only waiting. To the ones I miss, to the moments I still hold, I didn't forget. I just didn't know how to remember. She folded the letter and placed it inside the drawer with the mirror, tucking it beneath the velvet. Ash, as always, watched her do it, then curled up beside the drawer and purred. On Thursday, someone left a bell. It was small, the kind that might hang on a cat's collar, and had a tiny sweet ring to it when Nora picked it up. There was a note tied to its loop with red string for a sound I forgot I missed. HR, she tied it to the handle of the desk, where it would chime gently whenever the drawer was opened. People noticed. Some smiled, some teared up. One woman pressed her hand to her chest and whispered, "That's my grandmother's sound." By now, Nora had stopped trying to explain it all. She stopped wondering why Ash always seemed to know who needed comfort, or why some items vanished from the room as quietly as they had arrived. A scarf gone one morning, a drawing replaced with a new one, a pebble swapped for a marble. It wasn't loss, it was transformation. The way memory shifted shape and lived on in other hands. The way a room, given love and trust, could become more than furniture and books. It could become a soul. That night, Nora stood alone in the room of found things. The lantern flickered. The bell gave its tiny chime. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you for remembering me." She didn't know who she was saying it to. Maybe everyone, maybe no one. But the warmth that filled the room, soft, steady, whole, felt like an answer. On Friday morning, a child left a drawing on the windowsill. It was done in crayon, with unsteady hands and bright, impossible colors. A cat sitting in a big red chair. Books floating around him like stars. And in the center of the room, a large yellow heart. There were no words. Just the name, Rena, scrawled in the corner in reverse lettering. Ash sniffed it once and sat beside it like a curator. Nora taped it to the inside of the front window with care. "People need to see this," she whispered. That afternoon, someone left a map. It wasn't of the city or any familiar place. The paper looked handmade, the lines inked with a shaky pen. Mountains labeled, "What if," a river called "Before," a valley named "Soft Things I Forgot." The roads weren't straight. In fact, they didn't connect. Some simply ended in spirals. One looped back to its own beginning. In the corner, someone had written, "A map to nowhere," or maybe to now. And Nora placed it beside the mirror with a small card that read, "No GPS required." The map didn't stay there long. People turned it, traced it with their fingers, nodded quietly as if recognizing something only they could see. One customer whispered, "I think I've been there." Nora didn't ask where. That evening, the wind howled against the shop's windows. It wasn't a storm exactly, just a persistent, low whisper that rattled the panes and stirred the pages of unattended books. Nora brewed a second pot of tea and lit 2 candles in the room of found things. Ash, normally unbothered by weather, hopped into her lap and stayed there, heavy and warm. The room glowed gently, safe from the world outside. As the hours passed, Nora noticed something strange. Every visitor that day had left through the back. They didn't rush. They didn't seem confused. They simply drifted toward the far hallway after their time in the room, as though drawn by something soft and familiar. The hallway led only to a small, unused reading nook. It had been empty for weeks. Nora hadn't done anything with it. But now, when she peeked around the corner, she found the faint smell of pine. A blanket had appeared, her old one, with the frayed edges, and a small basket of stones sat beside a single chair. Not arranged, just there, like someone had been sitting quietly and left without needing to say goodbye. She added a sign by the doorway, "Stay a while," and someone did. That night, Nora sat in the room of found things and opened the wooden box of names again. She read them slowly. One by one, some names made her smile. Others caught in her throat. A few felt achingly familiar, like they might have once belonged to her. She added one more, Nora, because why not? Why not let herself be remembered too? Ash purred in approval. The next morning, a small group gathered near the back of the store. They weren't a club, not exactly, but they came around the same time now, on Saturdays. A painter, a woman who walked with a cane, a man who rarely spoke but always left with poetry, and a teenager with a chipped phone and a sketchbook covered in band stickers. They didn't speak much, but they all spent time in the room of found things. Then they sat in a reading nook together, sipping cocoa or staring out the fogged-up windows. Sometimes one would laugh. Sometimes one would cry. Mostly, they just were, and that was enough. Nora started calling them the Still Club in her journal. They're not trying to fix anything. They're just learning how to sit with it. That evening, she found another folded paper star. This one was purple, tucked behind the compass that still pointed east. Inside a simple sentence, "You're doing it right." She didn't know who it was meant for. Maybe for her, maybe for everyone. But she tucked it into her apron pocket and carried it for the rest of the night like a talisman. Outside, the wind had stopped. Inside, the room held steady. And Ash, as always, stayed close, a guardian not of secrets, but of stories gently unfolding. Sunday was still. Even the air inside the bookshop felt hushed, as though the walls themselves were holding a collective breath. The street outside was quiet, soft with early frost and the shuffle of gloved hands in boots. Nora unlocked the door and flicked on the lanterns. Ash trotted past her and leapt onto the chair in the room of found things, as if resuming his shift. The mirror glimmered faintly in the morning light. The compass still pointed east. The names were still there. So was she. At 10:30, a man came in with a cane and a bundle of letters tied with string. He didn't speak much, just nodded politely and moved to the back. He placed the letters beside the old bell and the small feather. Then he stood with his hand on the desk, silent. When he finally turned to leave, he said to Nora, "My wife used to write to me every Sunday. Even when we lived in the same house." Nora smiled gently. "That's love, I think." Saying it even when it's already understood. The man smiled back. "I didn't know where to put them all, until now." After he left, Nora added a small placard near the bundle, "Words we were meant to hear again." At noon, a girl came in crying. She wasn't loud, just red-faced and puffy-eyed, with a tremble in her shoulders and a tight fist clenched around something. Nora didn't ask. Ash approached the girl, sat beside her, and waited. After a few minutes, the girl knelt, opened her hand, and revealed a broken pendant. The chain was twisted. The charm, a little gold bird, was missing one wing. She placed it gently beside the map with all the wrong roads and stood in silence. Then she whispered, "She always said I could fly." Nora placed a card beneath it, "Things still trying." The girl nodded and left without a word. But as the door closed behind her, a small gust stirred the room, and the mirror shimmered. By mid-afternoon, Nora realized something. The room of found things wasn't growing full. It was becoming complete. The objects weren't random anymore. They formed a rhythm, a pattern of ache and hope, of loss softened by remembrance. A tiny paper crane appeared in the book drop. A worn ballet slipper was found under a poetry shelf. Someone left a harmonica that no longer worked beside a note. It still remembers the songs. Ash began curling in new places, under the desk, beside the lantern, atop the drawer, almost as if blessing the evolving shrine of small kindnesses. Nora sat in the chair that evening and opened her journal. She didn't write much. Just this: some things don't need fixing, they just need space. And warmth. And time. Ash purred. The bell gave its soft chime. Outside, the sky began to turn rose gold. Later, just before closing, someone knocked gently at the window. It was the teenager with the stickered sketchbook. He didn't come in, just tapped once, smiled, and handed something through the door. A photograph, faded but clear. Nora, years ago, standing in front of the same bookshop, the sign freshly painted, her expression proud and nervous. She stared. "I didn't think this existed anymore," she murmured. He shrugged. It was in an old zine archive. "Figured it might belong here." He waved and disappeared into the dusk. Nora placed the photo on the inside wall near the drawer, facing inward, not for customers, but for her. Beneath it, she wrote, "Don't forget, you began." The wind returned late that night, brushing softly at the windows but not howling. A breeze, a hush. Nora closed the door, dimmed the lanterns, and stood in the center of the room of found things. The mirror reflected the soft glow behind her. Ash curled in his chair, one eye half open. The drawer, once impossible to move, now slid open with ease. Inside, the letter she'd placed was joined by others. She didn't know how or when, but they were there, folded, layered, shared. Unclaimed and beautiful, she whispered, "Thank you," not expecting an answer, but maybe knowing she didn't need one anymore. It was snowing again. Soft, quiet flakes that felt like whispered confessions on the roof and windows of the bookshop. They muffled the world outside, turning cars and feet and hurried voices into background hush. Inside, the shop was warm, so warm. Ash curled on his red chair in the room of found things, a blanket loosely draped beside him. He hadn't left that spot much lately, as if he knew the room was reaching its fullness. Nora lit the candles early. She didn't expect many visitors that day, but that wasn't the point anymore. The door was open, that was enough. By mid-morning, a child arrived with a music box. She didn't say anything, just wound it once and let the melody play. It was slow and simple and slightly off tune. A waltz, maybe, or a lullaby. When it finished, she looked at Nora and said, "It's not broken, it's just tired." Then she placed it gently on the low table and added a pinnacone next to it. "For company," she said, and skipped away into the snow. Nora wrote on a card, things with hearts that never stopped. Around lunchtime, a woman came in and asked if she could leave behind her wedding ring. "I'm not sad," she said quickly. "It's just I wore it for 48 years. I don't need to anymore. But I want it to keep being something." Nora nodded. "It will." She didn't ask more. She placed the ring in a tiny porcelain dish beside the faded photograph of two hands clasped in winter gloves. The card she added read, "Still sacred." Later, a man brought in a stone from his childhood yard. "It used to be a planet," he said, laughing nervously. "Or so I thought." He didn't need to explain. Not really. Nora placed it with the marbles and shells, near the map to nowhere and the little origami boat that someone else had left just that morning. She called that shelf Imaginations That Refused to Grow Up. As evening arrived, a family came in, 2 adults, 2 kids. They didn't say much. They simply moved around the room, touching things gently, reading notes aloud. The younger child pointed at the compass and said, "It's still pointing." And the older one whispered, "Maybe it always does." Before they left, they added a paper chain, looped from colored strips with words scribbled inside. Hope, music, grandma, purple, morning pancakes, secret forts. Nora stretched the chain across the mirror's frame. She didn't cry, not really, just felt full. That night, after the lights were dimmed and the shop had closed, Nora sat in the room of found things. She brought her tea. Ash sat beside her, tail tucked, one paw on her ankle. The mirror reflected not her face, but the room behind her. The shelves, the notes, the compass, the drawer. It looked different now, not crowded, but lived in, rich, whole. She picked up the wooden box of names, ran her hand across the lid. It felt lighter, as though the names inside had been lifted, not removed, but carried, by those who needed them. By the room itself, by memory, Nora added one final name. Just 3 letters, Ash. The cat blinked at her, then stretched, slow and proud, as if acknowledging the honor. She whispered, "You knew all of us before we knew ourselves." And the bell chimed. Before she left the room, she changed the sign on the door. It had once said, "The Room of Found Things." Now, beneath that, in small script, it read, "Or maybe, things that found us." She left the light on. The cat curled up. The mirror glowed. The room held steady. Outside, the snow continued to fall, gentle and soft, like the world's most patient applause. And inside, even long after Nora had gone to bed, the stories stayed, the warmth stayed, the light stayed.